Welcome, everyone. We can start finding our seats. We want to get started. Hope everyone's doing well and having a good afternoon. I want to welcome you all here for our 17th annual Sacks-Wilner Holocaust Education Program. First, just a little bit of housekeeping. If you do have a cell phone, if you could put it on silent, that would be wonderful. Just in case we do have, let's say, some kind of emergency and we need to exit quickly, just want to make sure you're aware of where our exits are. So there's one here to my left and your right. You can see it says exit. And then if you go right to the left, there'll be an exit right outside the building, so that can get you right out in case it's needed. There's also an exit to my right where you would turn left and go down the hall to an exit of the building. In addition, in our social halls, there are, which are behind us, if we go through the exit and into the social halls, there are also two exits that will get you outside the building, just in case. So you're aware. Again, I want to welcome you all here in person, and there are all those on Zoom who are joining us as well. Thank you for taking your time out to come to this really important program, something that we do every year. And unfortunately, it seems every year there's another reason for us to take special heart of the programs that we are having every year. The rise of anti-Semitism in the last few years and the war that broke out in October, I think, is very much weighing on our minds. And the kind of anti-Semitism and rise in hatred that we've seen puts these issues closer to our mind. And so it's important, I think, for us to look back at our history, look back at the things that happened in the past, for us to learn the ways in which we can move forward. If we don't know our history and we don't appreciate it, we don't learn lessons from it, then it's difficult for us to move forward. So I really appreciate you all being here as we learn about perhaps a little known aspect of the history of the Holocaust. I want to thank a number of people who helped make this day possible. First, I want to say thank you to Linda and Steve Gallen for their dedication to educating everyone, not just Jews, but non-Jews as well, about the Holocaust. We're so grateful, of course, to the commitment that you made 17 years ago to start the Sacks-Wilner Holocaust Education Program. I also want to thank Laurel Cantor for her graphic design, for her beautiful flyers and promotional materials. I want to thank Jennifer Vistoso and Elizabeth Brune for all their help in preparing for today. Thank you to Judy and Rolando Archila for help with our dessert reception. I also want to let you know another little bit of housekeeping in case there's an issue of hearing. We do have assisted hearing devices, some headphones, so please do let me know if you need one to aid in your be able to hear this afternoon. I want to make a special mention of Rabbi Daniel Grossman, our beloved Rabbi Emeritus of blessed memory, who was instrumental as well in bringing the Sacks-Wilner program to Adith, and to Hedda Morton, who ran previous successful programs for many years. I want to take a moment to speak about the inspiration for our program this afternoon, Dr. Arthur and Mrs. Esther Sacks-Wilner. Arthur and his brother Erwin were partners in the practice of medicine. They were longtime members of Adith Israel congregation. During World War II, Erwin was deployed as a medic to Europe. Arthur remained in the U.S. to treat the returning soldiers, and his interest in the Holocaust began at that time. During his lifetime, Arthur received commendations from Presidents Harry Truman, Lyndon Johnson, and Richard Nixon. He was also honored with the State of New Jersey Joint Legislative Resolution by Senator Shirley Turner, then Assemblyman and now Mayor of Trenton, Reed Gasiora, and then Assemblywoman and current Congresswoman Bonnie Watson Coleman. Arthur had a wonderful life and a wife who supported whatever he did fully. It's due to Esther Sacks-Wilner that we have the Holocaust Education Program. She made it clear that she wanted Arthur's name to live on, and it certainly has in the 15 years of Holocaust education programs, now 17 years, that have been given in their names. Just a note about our program. We're going to begin with the presentation by our speaker, and we have some sheets that have some terms to help you follow the presentation. I try to put one on every seat, but there may be some seats I miss. So if you don't have one, let me know. I'll make sure that we redistribute the papers so that you could be able to follow along. And then after the presentation, there'll be some time for questions. So please do think during the program of a question you might have to ask our presenter. Those, of course, in the sanctuary can raise their hands, and then we'll repeat the question so that those on Zoom can hear and everyone in the sanctuary can hear as well. We're pleased to welcome today Debórah Dwork, the director of the Center for the Study of Holocaust, Genocide, and Crimes Against Humanity at the Graduate Center, the City University of New York. Pathbreaking in her early oral recordings of Holocaust child survivors, Dwork weaves the narratives into the history that she writes. Her award-winning books include Children with a Star, Flight from the Reich, Auschwitz, and Holocaust. Dwork is also a leading authority on university education in this field. She envisioned and actualized the first doctoral program anywhere in the world, specifically in Holocaust history and genocide studies. Dwork has received numerous awards, including the Annette Bells Kuberschmidt Award, bestowed by the Dutch Auschwitz Committee, and the International Network of Genocide Scholars Lifetime Achievement Award. Again, it's our pleasure to welcome Debórah Dwork as our speaker this afternoon.
So I piggyback on Rabbi Adler's thanks to add my own. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your.
It's on.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for your engagement. As Rabbi Adler said, there will be a terms list. Everybody have it? So let me reassure you right away, there is no final exam. You do not need to memorize them. They are simply terms. They're not even of historical importance, most of them. They're simply terms that come up in my talk. And if you are like I am and you hear a term that you don't compute right away, you will turn to the person next to you and say, what'd she say? So this is to help you follow along as to what I am saying. Also, I will speak for 45 minutes as instructed, plus minus 10%, depending upon how often I breathe. And another point of this list is that when you're wondering whether this woman is ever going to stop talking, take a look at where we are in the list, take a deep breath, and pace yourselves to the end. Okay? Everyone can hear? Okay. So let me frame this talk with 2 points. First, all too often, Jews' actions to save other Jews, or indeed themselves, is elided in discussions about rescue. Every Jew who went into hiding or passed as a Gentile was completely involved in rescue. If we step back and broaden the lens through which we look at hiding operations, Jews emerge as engaged actors. From the decision to disappear or pass, every step was a conscious act. It is true that no Jew survived the Holocaust in hiding without the help of Gentiles, and sometimes literally scores of Gentiles over the course of the years. It is equally true that every Jew actively participated in the process. It was hard work to disappear, to live as if one had vanished from the face of the earth and yet still stay alive. And it was hard work to pass as a Gentile. Second, flight was one avenue of rescue from the Holocaust. Indeed, rescue meant flight during the first 2 years of the war. Efforts to save Jews focused on getting them out of Nazi Europe. What is amazing is that efforts to flee continued even later, after the Germans launched the Holocaust in 1941. Today, I aim to highlight the agency of people caught in a constantly shifting situation and to scrutinize the factors they brought to bear in their decision-making. Age, gender, social class, all of these were important, of course, we know that. But so were, and we don't acknowledge and don't scrutinize, the role of luck, fortuitous circumstances, and timing. And this is going to drive me mad. So hold on one second. Just pause. We're at luck, fortuitous circumstances, and timing. The noose tightened around Jews in the Netherlands in 1942, and they knew it. Yeni Gans, the first entry on your list. Are you with me? Hello. Thank you. Yeni Gans and her husband Max had discussed immigration to South America a year earlier, but they didn't go. Perhaps family ties rooted them to Amsterdam. Yeni's parents did not wish to leave. Perhaps their well-established family business provided a sense of stability, if not security. Forced to wear the star in May 1942, Yeni and Max, like many other Jews in Western Europe, scrutinized the map. Britain, separated by the North Sea and the Germans' high-speed patrol boats, appeared impossible to reach. That left Spain and Switzerland, both long shots, but Switzerland more imaginable. Many Western European Jews knew someone who had traveled to Switzerland, or they had done it themselves. Few had any contact with Spain. Many Western European Jews spoke German or French. Few spoke Spanish. And Switzerland had a long history of neutrality and a tradition of asylum. Spain, by contrast, had recently endured a civil war. Jews in the Netherlands, Belgium, and France knew that Franco's fascist regime held the country in its grip, and it owed much to Hitler's Germany. A future for refugee Jews in fascist Spain appeared a murky prospect. The route from the Netherlands to Switzerland traversed Belgium and France, 3 borders to exit and enter. The challenges were too numerous to list. Who would help? How to find such persons? How much would it cost? Jews who embarked on this clandestine journey were not trained in covert missions. They did not know where to go or to whom to turn. Still, deciding they had little to lose, some Jews took their chances. A few, like Yeni and Max, had strong business connections in Switzerland and assumed that if they reached the border, their contacts would offer them hospitality. For the Hanses, as for others, the first step towards illegal, this is according to the Nazis, emigration, consisted of nothing more than a suggestion. Someone mentioned the name of a man who lived on a street called the Parallelweg in Debórah op Zoom, close to the Belgian border. This person, it was whispered, helped people on their way to Switzerland for a fee. Yeni and Max expected that they could manage the sum. Yeni and Max unfastened their stars and, with borrowed identity cards and only a briefcase for Max and a purse for Yeni, they walked to the train station. Detraining in Debórah op Zoom, they realized that the Parallelweg was not, as they thought, a village street, but a major roadway. They checked a telephone directory. The directory listed a name connected to a moving company, and they guessed that the business had acquired a new line, moving people. Yeni. He was a rough character who immediately understood our intentions. First, we had to pay, and then he would arrange for someone to take us to Belgium. He promised that by the next morning, he would find someone to accompany us, a passeur. He was true to his word. They took a streetcar in the direction of Belgium, and a passeur met them at the end of the line. He led them through a forest over the border to Heide, near Antwerp. Leaving them, he explained that a Belgian passeur would contact them. So far, so good. Yet, however closely stories of clandestine crossings resemble adventure tales, they ultimately rest on tragedy. The tragedy of forced departure, betrayal, refoulement, or being thrown back over the border. The couple got to Antwerp, where, as they did not have Belgian identity cards, they rented rooms from a cafe owner who charged them 3 times the posted rate. The Belgian passeur brought them identity papers, and he brought them trouble in the form of a man they feared was an informer. Suspecting a trap, they sought shelter with a Jewish butcher they knew. Mr. Boehm and his wife felt safe in Antwerp, and they saw no reason to leave themselves. As it happens, they were wrong. They were deported and murdered within a year. But at that moment, they hid the young couple in a friend's attic, while indeed 2 German trucks pulled up at the cafe. Clandestine rescue depended upon luck, fortuitous circumstance, and links. The Boehm family took charge. Confiding in a customer they believed to be in contact with the resistance, they found a man who, and now again I'm quoting Yeni, hated the Germans and understood we wanted to go to Switzerland. 2 more Jews from Rotterdam joined, and the customer put them in contact with a passeur who took them over the French border. Switzerland lay but 1 border away. They had been given the name of a contact in Besançon, some 25 miles from the Swiss border. They understood that this man and his group focused on sabotage, not rescue. But he would not turn Jews away. He was a railway worker, and he used his position to move people clandestinely, hiding anti-Nazi agents in the coal tender of the trains. The information was correct. The cheminot, the railway worker, did not turn them away. He found a passeur to accompany them on a train to a town near the Swiss border, offered them a warm dinner, and lodged them in a hotel occupied by the Germans, where he believed they would be safest. He was right. The Germans mounted dragnets throughout Besançon and arrested all foreign and stateless Jews in the city the next day. They did not bother to search the hotel in which they themselves were quartered. The passeur brought the Jews to a town 3 miles from Switzerland. It was pouring with rain. The passeur accompanied them on foot to a spot near the border. He would go no farther. The Germans shot anyone in that strip. They had 2 options, he explained. One path moved from farm to farm, inhabited by people prepared to help, and moved between France and Switzerland. The other path, more arduous, traversed an open plain and ascended the Jura Mountains. The border ran across the top. The 2 Jews from Rotterdam chose the less daunting route. Max and Yeni learned later that an informer had betrayed the farmers. Arrested at the 3rd house, those 2 refugee Jews from Rotterdam were sent to Auschwitz. Yeni and Max ran for their lives across the open plain, glad of the rain, because it prevented the guard dogs from picking up their scent, impeded the sentry's view, and muffled the noise they made as they crashed through the meadow. Safe on the other side, they climbed the mountain and walked into Switzerland. Welcomed by a local farmer who organized a car for them, they went on to Max and Yeni's business associate, Jean-Louis, in Chaux-de-Fonds. When Jean-Louis had been their guest in the Netherlands in 1940, he had invited them to return the visit and to stay for a month. Now, however, he asked to see their papers. Learning they had none, he demanded they leave his home immediately. Past midnight, in the rain, holding himself a law-abiding citizen, Jean-Louis drove them to a cheap hotel in utter silence. The policeman who interrogated them the next day was more sympathetic. Yeni's shoes had fallen apart in the climb, and he took her to buy a new pair before he dealt with their legal problems. He also told the shop clerk to charge Jean-Louis for the shoes. Still, they were illegals, and they were committed to prison, then transferred to a reception camp, and then into the custody of the Dutch envoy in Bern. Thanks to diplomatic protection, they were sentenced to house arrest for the duration of the war. They enjoyed luck, fortuitous circumstances, links to a sufficient number of trustworthy people, and timing. They entered Switzerland a mere month before it became impossible to do so. The very day that the railway worker, that cheminot, welcomed the Hanses at his door in Besançon, the Swiss Army Intelligence Service reported what it considered alarming news. And now the rest, what's coming, is from different official reports. Increasing number of Jewish refugees from the Netherlands and Belgium are stealing into Switzerland. All of these people leave their countries for the same reason, to escape the work camps to which they are sent by the occupation power. We conclude that regularly established organizations paid considerable sums of money take these people to Swiss territory. We see it as urgent to take measures to prevent the arrival of whole groups, which has become a usual occurrence recently. End of quotations from official reports. The Swiss leadership had no illusions about the nature of those work camps, as an internal memo revealed. Yet the officials believed Switzerland was in a struggle for its existence. And again, the reports, we cannot be squeamish. We therefore have ordered the ruthless expulsion of refugees. End of quotation. Cantonal authorities too often ignored the Federal Council decree of October 1939 to expel illegal refugees, and that had to stop. Not only were aliens arriving in numbers, smuggling people had become an organized activity. According to informants in the pay of the Swiss police, French passeurs were earning tidy sums to bring people across the border into Switzerland. Notwithstanding the grave risks posed by German patrols, the passeur, and I quote, gathers people at night into small groups of 5 or 10 and travels to the Swiss border with them. Anxious about the number of people coming in and, quote, the character of infiltration, meaning more and more organized and coordinated by professional passeurs, the government demanded action. Chief of Police Rothmund promptly called for the strict enforcement of the 1939 decree. And he said, even when the foreigners who are involved will incur risk of life and limb. Over and over again, clandestine passage turned on timing in terms of the progress of the war. As the tide turned against Germany, neutral nations became more hospitable toward refugees. Timing with regard to the season and increased difficulty in traversing terrain in inclement weather. The timing of running across a field during the interval of the sentry's rounds. Luck and fortuitous circumstances loomed large, and links to helpers and passeurs was critical. But timing, too, was key. Luck, fortuitous circumstance, and linkages were with Simon and Leah Sonnabend and their children, Charles and Sabine. Their timing was wrong. When Sabine got called up for forced labor in Poland, her family promptly left their home in Brussels. This is 9 August 1942. Her father, Simon, a watch wholesaler, had good contacts in Switzerland, and like Max and Yeni, he expected their support. He also had a Swiss bank account with 200,000 Swiss francs, and on hand, thousands of dollars in cash and checks, even more French francs, and valuable jewelry. They needed it. The Sonabens used professional passeurs to cross into France and then Switzerland and paid what amounted to a decade's earnings for a French worker. They entered Switzerland 3 days later, this is August 12th, and stayed in a small house in a forest for 2 days, expecting someone to come to collect them. While they waited, Rothmund ordered the cantonal police forces to seal the border and strengthen controls at the railway stations. The Sonabens went to Bienne, where Simon's business partner, Ernst Schneeberger, welcomed them warmly. The Sonabens were relieved and felt safe. None of them knew then that Rothmund had ordered the police to enforce the 1939 law ruthlessly. When Schneeberger tried to register them officially, the Bern authorities responded by arresting them. Obeying Rothmund's recent instructions, District Commander Sergeant Chauffin took the decision to return the Sonabens to the border that very evening. Schneeberger jumped to their rescue, persuading a well-known conservative district judge and an equally well-known liberal colonel to contact Chauffin in a bipartisan effort on behalf of the Sonabens. But Chauffin refused to reconsider. At 9 p.m., he collected Simon and Leah, who began to scream that this meant her death. Passers-by heard her, and some 50 people surrounded Chauffin's car. Overcome by pity, Chauffin reported, the public protested the refoulement. In order to prevent a riot, Chauffin took the Sonabens to prison. But theirs was a short reprieve. Police dressed in civilian clothes collected the family and brought them to the border by taxi and pushed them across. The border crossing went well, Chauffin reported to his superior the next morning. The costs of the taxi and the escort were paid by the party concerned, meaning the Sonaben family. For the Sonaben, refoulement spelled the end. Caught by German patrols, parents and children were separated. Simon and Leah were put on a train number 23 to Auschwitz the next day. Leah was gassed upon arrival, Simon a few days later. The Germans sent Charles and Sabine to an orphanage run by the French Jewish Council. The transit camp of Drancy happened to be full at that moment, so the children who were slated for future deportation survived. The refoulement of the Sonabens also spelled the end of Rothmund's harsh policy. 2 MPs mounted a campaign in the press and in parliament, reminding their countrymen of the basic humanitarian principles at stake. The government switched course. In early September, Rothmund instructed police to admit elderly refugees and family members of earlier asylum seekers. Later that month, he added ill people, pregnant women, unaccompanied children under the age of 16. These policy changes prompted a new pattern in illicit crossing: groups of children. By April 1943, this had become so common that the police determined to investigate. According to reports by the relevant military offices, a remarkable stream of refugee children aged 5 to 16 has appeared near Geneva for the past 3 days, an official reported. The children arrive in groups of as many as 32 every day. As they are not accompanied by adults, it is clear that an organization takes them to the Swiss border. Believing that the French Red Cross was responsible, the Swiss government contacted their representative in Vichy, France, Walter Stucky. The French Foreign Office had looked into the matter, he responded, but the best they could offer was that there was some evidence that an organization named OSE was involved. Unfortunately, Stucky concluded, neither the French Foreign Office nor he knew anything about OSE. That they did not was sheer luck for everyone in the OSE operation. The officials had no reason for ignorance. OSE, a legal Jewish philanthropic organization, had operated in France for a decade by that point. How the French Foreign Office failed to find an organization with the Champs-Élysées address remains a mystery. OSE, for its part, although a legal organization, engaged in illegal activities, hiding children and smuggling them over the border, primarily into Switzerland, but also into Spain. Georges Dwork took charge of developing a way to escape to Switzerland. I chose Annemasse as the jump-off point for OSE children, he explained decades later. Located at the end of a railway line near the Swiss border, Annemasse had long served as a camp vacation spot. The townspeople were used to seeing groups of children come and go. Annemasse also had a long tradition of contraband traffic between France and Switzerland, so there were plenty of passeurs in the area. The system he developed, Georges met the children in Aix-les-Bains and took them by train to Annemasse. Sympathetic railway workers helped them avoid German patrols at the Annemasse station exit by posting an "Exit for Camp Groups" sign over one door. Georges found a passeur to accompany the children. So the children exited through the specially marked door. And at 10 p.m., after curfew, they lined up silently, 2 by 2, an older child holding a younger child by the hand, and slipped through an opening in the wire fence with the passeur. I ordered the children never to say the word OSE, Georges reported, but to talk about the Red Cross. And perhaps this is why the Swiss believed the Red Cross was responsible for the clandestine crossings. Georges paid the passeur after the fact when all had gone well, but the costs were high. By spring 1944, no amount of money sufficed. At the end, they were afraid, Georges recalled. The Germans had reinforced their border patrols, and the passeurs just didn't want to chance it, even for more money. So I myself took the children. By that time, a number of OSE operatives took children to the border. Bougie Hirsch had come to Paris from her native Romania in 1929 when she was 16 years old. In 1943, she got involved in hiding children in France or spiriting them out of the country. Jewish, Romanian, and speaking accented French, Bougie guided children to the Swiss border. Bougie typically did not cross herself, but like Georges Ranger, she found that by the summer of 1944, no sum of money bought their help. In August, she took a Palestine-bound group over the Pyrenees to Spain. We know of passeurs such as Bougie Hirsch and Georges Lanchet because they belonged to organizations that told their history and the history of the people they had served or tried to serve. We know little about the professional passeurs who had smuggled goods before the war, people during the occupation, and went back to contraband after the surrender. At best, police reports explained that passeurs live near the frontier and are almost all notorious contraband runners ready for any type of job. We know even less about the thousands of people who helped Jews like the conjures. It is probable that most Jews did not flee through an organized underground. They sought their way on their own, and if they found trustworthy people to help them, and luck, fortuitous circumstances, and timing were with them, they succeeded. Isabel Riff and her sister Charlotte were among them, but we will never know the passeurs whose efforts saved the lives of these young girls. And these are the last people I'll be telling you about. Isabel was born on Christmas Day, 1932 in Antwerp. Her Czech-born Yiddish-speaking father was part owner of a diamond cutting and polishing business. Her Hungarian mother was a housewife. The business did well, and, I quote, "I remember in 1937 we moved to a flat. It was a great event to move into a modern flat with central heating and modern furniture. And that was 1937. 1940, the war broke out and we left everything. The new chairs, the new chandeliers, whatever was fashionable in those days, we left it." Isabel, her 2-year-old sister Charlotte, and their parents sought safety in the south of France. They landed in Béziers, where they lived off the sale of valuables they had brought with them, help from Osé, and the generosity of strangers. Life on the run, precarious at best, teetered on the edge of disaster. When Vichy, in collaboration with the Germans, unrolled dragnet operations targeting foreign and stateless Jews in the summer of 1942, her parents recognized their peril. The girls were to be smuggled out of the country. The last time Isabel and Charlotte saw their parents during the war, Isabel recalled, "My mother had a new dress for each of us. She had new shoes for us. And I remember her giving me a comb, and she said to me, 'From now on, I must comb my sister's hair. I must wash her. I must clean her. I must look after her.' And that we were going to Switzerland. I had another uncle who lived in Switzerland then, and that he will be there to receive us. How we would get to Switzerland, who would take us, she did not know. I remember we had a meal together, and then our parents kissed us goodbye." One of Isabel's many uncles was a university student in Montpellier. His friend, a young woman and fellow student, brought the girls false papers. Posing as their mother, she accompanied them by train to her home in Montpellier. Well after midnight, another student came to fetch the children from her house. The girls were told to follow him, but were forbidden to speak to him or acknowledge his presence. Traveling again by train, they went to Lyon and on to Thonon-les-Bains, a small resort town on the French side of Lake Geneva. The student booked himself and the two girls into a hotel. We were there for 2 weeks in that beautiful town. It was absolutely beautiful. And for me to live in a hotel and eat what they brought to the table, that was not kosher food. For me, that was an experience. And my parents had said, and everybody had said, whatever they give you, you eat. Whatever they tell you to do, you do. We were there in this hotel, and he was trying to contact a smuggler to take us over to Switzerland. He could not find the smuggler. One day, when the town was entranced with a troupe of traveling artists and their performing dogs, bear, and clown, the young man telephoned the girl's uncle in Montpellier. What should he do? No sooner had he put down the phone than there was a raid on the hotel. The Germans came, and they were looking for us. I took my sister, and we mingled amongst the people standing in the street watching the performance. Neither the girls nor the student were found, but he had to disappear, and they had to move on. I was told there would be a lady with a bicycle. We followed her. We did not walk with her through the streets. She took us to her father's house. He was the local Protestant parson. The girls were safe for 1 week before another raid drove them out once more. The minister's daughter took the girls high up into the mountains to an orphanage she directed, and she told us, there are some of the staff who are with the French, and there are some who are collaborators with the Germans. Isabel's spirits flagged and her health deteriorated. I was violently sick. This was tension. I could not eat by then. I was already beginning to become desperate because we were handed from people to people whom I never knew. I had never seen them before, and I will never see them again. But they were very kind. Otherwise, we would not have survived. One Sunday in September, when the children of the orphanage went out to collect mushrooms, 10-year-old Isabel and her 4-year-old sister, with baskets on their arms, walked away from the group deeper into the woods. The director of the orphanage pointed the way. My sister's shoes were torn by then, those new shoes which my mother had prepared in the flat. The sole had curled off. It was made from paper. And I remember I had to put those torn shoes on my sister. We left the group of children and we walked. This time, they were successful. They were met by a smuggler carrying a lunchbox filled with real Swiss chocolate. Persuading her sister to walk by tempting her with chocolate, they crossed the border. It was beautiful. The taste of that chocolate I have never found again. So now is the time when you get your money's worth, and since you didn't pay a ticket, if you have questions, any questions? Ma'am. question is, how did Jews who were on the run manage with languages? And it's a great question. First of all, Jews who were there's a difference with the distinction between Jews who were passing and Jews so they had to have a perfect knowledge of the host country language, and Jews who were going from place to place, from passer to passer, who knew that they were on the run. So when they were going from passer to passer, they did not necessarily need to have perfect language, because the passers were invested either because they were paid or out of principle. But languages is definitely an issue. Italian Jews, for example, there are historians of Italian Jewry who do believe that one of the reasons why so few Italian Jews survived camps like Auschwitz or other slave labor camps was because they did not speak German, just as you suggest, ma'am. They did not have a language, and so they were given orders which they could not possibly follow because they did not understand them, and were shot summarily or beaten on the spot. So language is a factor, a major factor. Thank you. Hirsch. So Spain at that time was absolutely Franco's fascist forces had defeated Republican Spain. So Spain was a fascist country that owed a great debt to Hitler and to Germany. On the other hand, Franco did remain neutral, to Hitler's great annoyance, but did nevertheless. But of course, no one knew in 1942 that he would remain neutral. So there were a number of reasons why Jews would have chosen Switzerland over Spain, one of which was the regime in Spain. Meantime, I should also say that Jews who slipped over the border, so those Jews who went to Palestine, the port was actually Portugal. So they went over the border from France into Spain, through Spain, and across the border into Portugal with another fascist, Salazar, in power. So as it happened, Salazar's great school friend was a Jewish man, and they remained great friends. So what Salazar's politics would have been about the question of Jewish refugees is unclear. But what is clear from his letters and record is that he had a warm spot for his friend, and his friend had become the head of the Jewish community, and therefore he did not order his border patrols to throw back refugees into Spain. He did order them to ensure that Jews moved on after 30 days. So people came in on a 30-day, first of all, they slipped in clandestinely. Second of all, they came in legally with 30-day passes. And then when the 30-day passes came due and they didn't have a place to go, then they went below the radar, which is the longest answer to your question. But I happen to be really interested in this question of Portugal. Yes, Bougie Hirsch survived, and I recorded her oral history. Yeah. Speaking less accented French by the time I met her. No, no, no. And she was somebody who worked for Jose and took the children over the border into Spain. Then she went back. Someone else took over and took them to Portugal. She went back to France and she survived in France and remained in France. Yes, yes. So the question is, what happened to Charlotte and her sister? Um, yes, um, Isabel. Isabel, I met Isabel in London, where she was happily married, had a number of children. I was trying to remember how many, but don't remember. She married an Orthodox rabbi and had moved from Belgium to England. Isabel's sister fared less well than Isabel did, not in terms of her marriage, but in terms of her mental health. As it happened, happily, luckily for the Riff sisters, for those girls, both parents survived the war. Both parents came back. But it is also true that the girls had grown into the family that fostered them. And they were very happy and very secure in that family. And so when their parents took them back to Belgium, neither girl felt secure, confident. One of the ways this expressed itself with Isabel is that Monday she would go to school, Tuesday, Wednesday. By Thursday, she had a stomach ache. And if that girl went to school on a Friday, she didn't remember it ever. So then she would be ill for the whole of the weekend. And she was very eloquent on the subject of stability and security for children. Sir. Sorry, I don't hear you. No, none of these was to ever made into a screenplay. Not Isabel Riffs, not Yaney and Max. None of them was. Not Simon and Leia and their children, Charles and Sabine. The screenplay is, the movie is in my head. And it's a historical movie. Last question from anyone? Sir. Is about Swiss neutrality and how this manifested itself in terms of letting in refugees. And I once heard a Danish helper in the rescue of the Danish Jews, Monk Preben, talking about Sweden and Sweden's neutrality. And he said, you know, Sweden was Axis neutral, until the Allies began to win the war. And then they became Allies neutral. And I think that that image works also for Switzerland. So Switzerland had a more up and down situation. October 1939, a draconian closure of the border to Jews, ordered by the federal government. The cantons pretty much ignored it. Then Rothmund, the chief of police, insisted upon it. Then came this Schneeberger episode, and it challenged the country to rethink its priorities. But of course, by that point, the Allies were also winning the war. So was it a question of principle? Was it a question of Allies neutral, Axis neutral? I think many factors are at work for changing the course of policy. Sure.
But how they that people knew about certain ways, you know, please know, talk about the easy path, you know, in one of the stories, the police found them.
So from them.
So creativity, outside the box, but that's the fact. Say, what can I do that no one else knows about? Find a way, make their own.
We would love to think that people can make their own luck. And of course, to some extent, people do. But that's also the flip side of that, is saying that all the people who were murdered did not make their own luck. They depressed everybody. Is what was the role of Spain during the war? And that is another whole story. So just to be very, very brief, it was checkered. It was a checkered history. They did not embrace Jewish refugees. They threw some back, but they let others through, seemingly without rational criteria. And there we will end it until you bring me back another time to talk about Spain and Portugal.
Thank you again to Debórah Dwork for really a fascinating presentation. And we have some refreshments in the social hall. So we hope that you'll join us and take a moment for some refreshments, some treats. And we really appreciate telling, I think, stories that we wouldn't hear, and you really brought the details of them in such a powerful way that we'll always remember. So thank you so much for being here. Yes, and thank you all for coming, and thank you to our friends on Zoom.